got a lot of content, and I'm not sure, I'm going to try to get it all fit in, but of course the slide deck will be available afterwards if you guys want it all published or I'll also make it available. But this is no rest of the query. My name is Eric Wisakowski, and some of you have seen me in prior presentations. If you haven't, I try to get into these community events as much as I can, usually Saturdays, SharePoint Saturdays, etc. And we're going to be talking a lot today about REST in SharePoint 2013. It is available in 2010. It's not as robust as 2013, so we're just spending a lot of time on 2013. But it will, the same principles and ideas will apply to 2010 if you're at 2010 environment. So to get started, the agenda for today, we're going to discuss what is REST, like a real high-level overview of REST for those who aren't familiar with REST or never worked with it or kind of have an idea but aren't quite sure. We're going to talk about how REST applies in SharePoint 2013. We're going to discuss the SharePoint REST endpoint URI structure, which is a lot for saying how it works and how it's wired up. We're going to navigate the SharePoint REST data structure at a very high level, so you can see how to get to list items, folders, lists, people, objects, etc. We're going to work with lists and list items, like I just said, and we're going to work with folders and files. We're also going to leverage permissions using REST. Things such as getting into groups, getting into roles, breaking role inheritance, things like that. All things you can do with a simple REST query. And then ultimately some Q&A at the end if needed. I'm going to try to keep this, like I said, on time and condensed. If I start talking fast, please let me know. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But if I do hold questions till the end, it's just because I want to keep the presentation moving. A little bit about me, I promise it'll be short. I'm a SharePoint.NET developer for General Motors. Among a lot of certifications, I have CTS in SharePoint 2010 app development, and I've been building on SharePoint since 2007. And I started programming in 1982, sorry, on IBM 3090 mainframes. So I've been doing this a while. What is REST? Well, REST is an abbreviation for representational state transfer. It's a stateless architecture that exploits HTTP and XML using common web operations like get, post, put, delete. This is something that's been around since 2000. This is not new. A gentleman named Roy Fielding developed this with the W3C technical architecture group in parallel with HTTP 1.1. So this is not new. This has been around for a long time. You could use REST outside of SharePoint for a whole lot of things in the World Wide Web. This is just an architecture. It can support a large number of components and interactions. It's very simple to implement. And it is platform independent, which makes it really nice for those who are trying to work on something that's cross-platform and not specifically for a native UI. The other thing about REST, well, I'll get into that. I'm getting into myself, sorry. I get very excited about REST. It's a really, really cool topic. The components of REST are a base URI. So in this case, we're going to be using a server.dat/site like we're used to seeing in SharePoint. A media type. Do you want your data back, or do you want to give the query JSON data, Atom data, XML data? Your choice. How you want the data back, how you want to present your data to it. And we're going to use standard HTTP methods, such as get, post, put, and delete. That's all there is to it. There is no official standard for a RESTful web API because REST is not a protocol, it's an architecture. So nobody got together and said, this is how thou shalt do REST. It's just how it's been done because it's an architecture, it's not a protocol. I think if someday it's adopted as an official standard, there may be some protocols or some standardizations done with it, but because it's so flexible and so versatile on so many different platforms, I find it hard to believe we're going to sit down and actually hire out a standard code. That's my version. We're going to be remotely interacting with SharePoint sites. I mean, that's the great benefit of REST is you don't need a client object model, you don't need a native client application, you don't need APIs, all you need is a simple REST query. We will be using jQuery, JavaScript, and some SharePoint, obviously. There will be some code, when I'm putting up code samples up here, it's imply that there's some understanding of everybody of jQuery and JavaScript. If you don't worry. There's an abundance of resources online. I have a lot of links for you to look at. I'll have code samples that you can take with you, that you can play with and experiment with to get more familiar with it. If you are familiar, you'll see that this is just one way of a myriad of ways of doing this. We're going to be using also the Open Data Protocol, or what I'll abbreviate to just OData. Here it said OData. It corresponds to the desired client object model API. For example, if in an application you were to say, you know, SharePoint list.getByTitle listening, okay, in REST it would look like this. We're going to leverage the _API/web, and I'll get more into how this is constructed here in a minute. /getByTitle. So it looks really similar. List getByTitle, list getByTitle, pass in the list name as a parameter. Very similar. The object model in REST very closely matches a typical object model API that you would find on a client. The service that runs in SharePoint and handles this is just called client.svc. This is more trivial. It handles all the HTTP requests that come back and forth between you and SharePoint. The result, you can return in either JavaScript object notation, or you can return it in Atom XML. Totally up to you. Right here is a diagram of what's happening. Just as a quick visual aid, you're here. We send a request over to SharePoint using our queries that we're going to demonstrate. The service accepts the request, passes it to the server object model, which gets your information, passes it back to the server object model. The service then returns it in JSON or Atom, depending on what you originally requested in your header. That's it. REST allows typical CRUD operations, which is going to be really handy for creating, updating, and deleting lists, list items, folders, adding items to folders. We're actually, in a demo here, we're going to create a file, a text file, and add it to a folder in SharePoint using only REST. And among many other operations, but REST allows typical CRUD operations that you would normally do in SharePoint in the UI. Reading a resource is going to use the GET REST operation. If you want to create or update a resource, we have to use post. And I'm going to show you an example of what happens when, and I just made this mistake this morning, when you want to get, for example, context info out of the website, out of the SharePoint site, and you do a GET request instead of a post. There's built-in security in SharePoint that prevents you from doing that. If you want to insert or update a resource into a list, we're going to use a put. And if we want to delete a resource, we use the delete function in REST. The URI is going to closely mimic the API in the SharePoint client object model. For example, if we want to access a site collection, we would use server site. Again, there's _API. That's how you're going to invoke the REST API in SharePoint 2013/site. So if we're going to access a specific web, what our users are going to say, a website or a site, we know it as a web, you would do /web. So, and consequently in here, and I didn't put this in here, but consequently in here, if you wanted to access a list in a website, it would be web/lists, and so on. We're going to walk the object model here in just a minute so you can see an example. One question I had earlier from a couple people, is REST available in 2010? Yeah, absolutely. It's just not as robust as 2013. Microsoft went out of their way to make it a whole lot easier and better to use in 2013, but it is available in 2010. You might see either of these if you're looking around online, asking questions. This is available in SharePoint 2013, but it was wrapped into this. So either one of these will work in 2013. I recommend using this format. It's easier, it's more lightweight, better to remember. This is not available in 2010. This is how you have to spell it out in 2010. But otherwise, the OData filtering, the selection criteria, the order by, all the other things we're going to discuss today are available in 2010. Just not as fluid and robust. So, some examples of walk-in the data structure for 2013 now. If we want to retrieve all lists on a web, we would do API/web/lists. Okay? If we want to see all of the information in a specific list, we can say lists/getByTitle. That is not case sensitive, by the way. I want to make a note of that. Old guy, I like to camel case and Pascal case things. I'm sorry. It is not case sensitive. You can pass this in all lowercase and it'll work fine. List get by title, list name will give you all of the items in that list. All of the fields also, and we'll go into how to select specific ones too. You can also request list information by passing in the GUID for that list, which you may want to do for security reasons or for, to make sure you're absolutely getting the list you want, whatever. It's your call, whatever you want to do. But if you want to pass in the list GUID, it would be passed in as GUID apostrophe GUID, like that. We can see all of the items in the list. Like this time I called this widgets by tasks list. So if we want to see all the items in that list, we would do get by title, widgets, /items. The /items will return all of the list items. So the first one's going to give you list information. If I just say get by title, it'll give you like created by, last modified, all the general information about the list. This bottom one will give you all of the actual list items. If I want to see just the second item in the list, you would just items paren number 2. That'll give you item number 2 in that list. If you want to say item number 10, you do items paren 10, like that, if you happen to know what item number it is. It's not necessarily the ID, it's the ordinal listing of the items. So if your IDs go 1617 and you say give me item 3, it's going to give you ID 17, the third item in the list as it's looking at it from that view, from the default view. So enough of me talking, let's do some demos. See if I can get this to cooperate. So my SharePoint demo here is in Azure. So I'm hoping it's going to behave. It behaved a few moments ago in the other room. And I'm hoping it's going to cooperate. Let me copy this. So right here, I'm just going to say, give me all of the lists in my SharePoint site. Put this over here. So this is Chrome, and I'm using a plugin called CREST that just lets me place REST calls against anything. In this case, I'm using SharePoint. And I'm going to do a get. I get a lot of information back. But what's happening is it's giving me an Atom XML format, but it's giving me every list in this site. So in my root site collection, say give me, in my root web, give me all of the lists, and it's giving me everything. What's it starting with here? Title, app data, then compose looks. I'm looking at the titles here. Content type, publishing error log. It's going to give me everything, not just, if you want to target a specific web, like your, business unit site collection /web/list, then you'll see things like shared documents, tasks, discussions, etc. Here I'm telling it to give me the root, so it's giving me absolutely everything. You can see this is monstrous. And here's master page gallery. That would be one way of getting, or that's the to get all the lists. If I want to get info on just my demo list, for example, because I have a list called demo, I'm going to now do web/list/get by title. Notice I lowercase everything here just to prove the point. It really does work. So now, let me get back up here. Let's see if that looks quite nice. Now I'm just going to say, give me info on the demo list. And notice, this is still a GET request, because this information is just, I'm saying, just give me, it's not so much security. I have no security on this list. If I wanted to insert information into the list, change information, or delete information, now context info and security is going to apply, and we're going to have to know who this user is, do they have access to the list, and we're going to show you, I'm going to show you how to do that in this as well. Here I'm just querying information. It's just viewable. Anybody can see anything. It's read-only. And I can see, here's my demo list. Then it gives me all the information about the demo list itself. Okay. The next one here. So give me all of the items in the demo list. And then once you see that, I'll move on. Because getting the single item is pretty straightforward. And you can see it's fairly fast as well. I mean, as far from the query to the return of the data, it's pretty quick. There. So now give me all the items in the demo list. There should be 3. Okay. So here's item 1, and that's its name. Item 1. I'm very creative. There's item 2, right here. Item 3. But when it returns all the items, it's going to give you all the fields also, like modified by, created by, or last modified, created on, who created it, who last modified it. All the things you would normally get out of a list, you can get as data back in a RESTful. And it's pretty quick. And then I'll go back to So now that we know how to get the data, how do we filter it? Because there was a lot of information that was returned to the screen, and we don't always need to know all of that information. It's sometimes we just want to see the title, or just the title and the last modified date. A lot of the most common things we're going to see. We're going to filter it using OData, or that Open Data Protocol. Something like this. So just appending, and it looks a lot like a normal URL. First parameter, question mark. Second parameter and subsequent parameters are all ampersand. Question mark, dollar, select equals title will now filter those results to show me only the title field of that list. Yes, sir?
So I know you said 2013 you had the underscore API, 2010 you don't. So are you saying for that underscore API you just replace it with that path?
Yeah. So it goes server/site/ underscore VTI underscore bin / web / or client service, / web / list / yeah. Same thing. And as far as the OData goes, like these filters, you just, after you're done with your main base query, just append this to the end of it. Start with the question mark for your first parameter, ampersands for all your other ones, and it'll operate the same way in 2010.
And then
oh, okay, that's fine. Another example here, like before when we said, give me the second item in the list, now this is going to give me the title of the second item. So I'm further refining down my query to say, instead of giving me the title of everything, give me the title of only the second thing. It might be something you want to do. Here's another example. What if I want to give me all of the items in this list that start with the letter R? Here would be an example of how to do that. So you do question dollar, filter, equals, starts with field name, comma, what? It can be a letter, it can be a number, whatever you want. Whatever you want to filter by. Can you use these in conjunction? Absolutely. Does it matter what order they go in? No. SharePoint doesn't care. Oh well, REST doesn't care. Start with either one of these, but for the second one after like title, for example, you would do ampersand dollar filter equals. You just want to make sure that all subsequent parameters are an ampersand instead of a question mark. And one last, well, 4 examples here. This one is, well, okay, I got ahead of myself. This is what I was just talking about. So notice here I did filter, and then, oh yeah, by the way, I also want just the title of all of the items in the list that start with the letter C, which in this case is none of them. They all start with I. And then one last one, and these are just examples. There's a whole lot of these, but I don't have time to go over each one of them. Let's say I just want the first top 10 items. Okay, so just do $top equals 10. If you want to limit your result set from that, you can do that. You can also convert the data back to JSON format. We're going to be doing a lot of JSON results in these queries. We're going to be passing JSON data in, getting JSON data back. It's the format that I prefer. I will be showing you some XML examples, but a lot of the stuff we're going to be doing back and forth is JSON. So if you're familiar with that, great. If not, like I said, there's a lot of examples in here. I'll give you also some URL you can reference. So we're going to be using, in this case, here's a way I constructed this to say, give me out of the SharePoint 2013 environment, give me the category type list. Give me all the items that start with the letter R and just show me the title field. You need to add a header into your request. And the example I'm going to show you is is a jQuery example when I start doing the demos, and I'll show you where all this goes. We need to add an accept header that says application/JSON, semicolon, OData equals verbose. So what we're telling the engine is, you can accept application JSON version data back and forth openly. I can say my content is JSON if I don't care what you give me back. But if I want JSON back, you have to say accept. And then OData verbose just means take everything I'm putting in the URL and treat it exactly the way I said it. Don't try to HTML encode it. Don't do anything with it. Just treat it exactly the way I put it in there. The results will be in a JSON format. If this is hard to read, I apologize. But it's what we're used to seeing when we do JSON queries. You see things nested as D results or D data, however the response comes. But as you can see in this case, for example, I said, give me this information. This is how the data came back. All I had was the title field. So now let's do some demos with, let me switch over to samples. And we're going to go to that same list, and I'm going to show you the same example. Give me all of the items out of the demo list, but just show me the title. And we're going to pare that down a whole lot. We go to my REST client, my REST web app, and I hit request. Now all I have are titles. Now you're going to get other information back, like category, terms, and IDs, etc. But all of the other bloat is gone. All I have in my internal properties now are just titles. Yes, sir?
So, for the previous slide, you showed the header. Was the header the view text? I know what the header is.
The header was to say, give me JSON data back.
Okay.
So now, let me show you an example of that. If I come up here, and I add a header that says, accept application JSON, and I say request. No, it's not going to listen. You would put it, I'll show you how to do it in my live demo in Ajax. I'll show you where you put that and how you get JSON data back. This one's not going to the next one, I want to show you. But yeah, that one will to say, give me JSON data back. If you want to send JSON data, there's another header you got to put in, and I'm going to show you that one as well. One more I'll show you before we move on here. I'm going to say, give me, well, I don't have 10 items, so here I'm going to say, give me the title of all items in the demo list that start with the letter C. None of them do. All we have is one that starts with the letter, or three of them that start with the letter I. So just for example, if you're doing a sanity check on a list, to say, okay, well, just give me anything that starts with the letter C. I get nothing back. This starts with the demo. Uh-oh, the demo's failing. But it's not going to show anything anyway because in the demo list, all we have are three items that start with the letter I. So it could be dying because of that, but either way, you're not going to get anything back, and you can handle that accordingly in your code. When you say, did you find anything? No. Okay, respond accordingly. Response. So examples of OData. That you can append, filter, select, title, top at the end of it. There's a lot of them. I have links available in here that you can go to see all of them. But that's a great way to filter the results so you're not getting a whole chunk of data back if you don't want it. The first thing we're going to do is work with lists and list items is creating a list item. There's two methods of enforcing request security, because in this case now we have to do a post. We can't do a get when you want to mess with list items. It's going to require whoever is using this, whoever is logged into the browser at that time, to have enough permissions to do said operation. So in this case, creating a list item, there's two ways we can capture their context info and pass it to the REST query. The first one is to add a form digest value to the query. So to get this information, you go to _API/context info. Let me do that really quick. And it has to be a post. This is the mistake I made earlier. Let me show you what that looks like. So in here, now I'm just going to say API/context. That one. And I'm going to leave it at get. And it's going to break. It's going to throw a 404. This is inherent SharePoint security. It will not allow get requests for context info for obvious reasons. If you don't have the right permissions, you don't belong in there. So this time I'm going to make it a post. And I'm going to say request. Now I get data back. Oh, I should have got data back. Oh, you know what? This is data back. Let me fill this with a new one.
Your URL's wrong.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Thank you. Yeah, I know. Check the URL. Okay, now I make it a post. Now I get data back. Thank you. So, what is it telling me? Well, we have to pass a form digest value into this thing. This is the form digest value. This entire thing. All the way through to the end of the time. Yeah, it's ridiculously huge. What it is, it's a unique identifier, a date timestamp that comes from the server that says this person attempted to visit this site at this time. I acknowledge they belong here, and here's the hashed encrypted value with the date and timestamp that says that they're okay to be here for this timeout duration. You pass that into your query over here. Let me get back in here. And you copy the entire value when we build the post query. And I'm going to show you where you would put that. Okay. Again, there's an example of where I found it. It was way at the bottom when you did API/context info, do a post request, and then that mess that you get is what you get back. You don't have to do this. This is just one way of doing it. I'm going to show you what I believe to be a lot faster and easier method that requires jQuery. That's all you need if you're using jQuery. I love jQuery. So normally in the header portion of this construction of this AJAX call that I'm going to make to get my REST information, you would add an X request digest and then that entire value in here in double quotes. Or using jQuery, we can just do that. And it will go out, find this in the page, scrape it, and put it in that header for you. It's a whole lot easier. Yes, sir?
What's the colon denote?
In JSON, we're separating the key from the value here.
Okay.
So this is your key, and then this is your value. It'll make more sense, I think, when I pull up the code here in a couple slides and I show you, these are where your headers go, this is where your metadata goes. I think it'll make more sense. I hope it will. Okay. But yeah, I'm just separating key and value when I'm passing the header information up to the browser.
Okay.
So you create a list item. We begin with the post URL. In this case, it's going to be, when I do my demo, it's going to be get by title demo/items. Okay? We're going to add 3 headers to the request. An accept application JSON, because I want JSON data back, because I like my JSON. Content type application JSON, because I'm giving it JSON information. And that's where you saw that key value here a second ago. I did that in JSON format, and that's why I had that content type there, or have it as application JSON. And then an X request digest. Here you can either paste in that giant value, or you can do the jQuery request digest.val. We're also going to need a request body, and I'll show you where that goes in this code sample as well. In the request body is going to go metadata is the key, and then the value has to start with the data type, and then what you want to pass in. Field name title, value, my category. It's a nested JSON format that's saying, pass in this object with this data type associated with it. I want to do a direct example here in just a minute. Where do you find this metadata type? How did I come up with that? If I go back, you see how it says sp.data.category _x? Where do you get that? Let me show you. When you go to your list/items, you get by title /items, one of the fields that comes back is going to be that category term. Remember I said you're not going to get rid of ID, category term, all the expires. Category term is going to tell you the exact data type that list is expecting when you pass it in. That value is what goes in that metadata type field. Typically, not in every case, It's sp.data.listName list item. Why they did it that way? In my experience, that's how it's constructed. That's how you'll find it most often. It's the internal name list item. So let's say I said category underscore X0020 underscore space. So my list name was category type, space type. So that's why it was category underscore X00 type list item. So we're going to create a list item here. It's going to hopefully make a whole lot more sense. When I go into my code, and I showed you the context info part, let me pull up this demo list real quick and show you what that looks like. Clear this out. Paste this in here. I don't need a post. I'll do this when we get. Category term. Right there. So my list name is demo, and it called it sp.data.demo list item. So it's a list item from the demo list, and it's a data object. So the category or the data type is going to be sp.data.demo list item. That's what you're going to see in my demos, because that's what it's expecting. You guys, when you're doing it yourself, you're going to have to go in there, get the list information, look down here for category term, and use your words specific to your scenario. In my code, we're going to create a list item. This is the example of the function that creates the list item. So I'm starting out, and I'm just wrapping it all in just an AJAX call. So I'm starting out with the URL, which is, web list, get by title, list name items, like I did before. Okay. My type is post, because remember I've got you can't do GET requests to manage list items. You got to do post. And then my data, I'm converting it to JSON and passing in metadata, that demo list item type, and then title, item name, because I'm using parameters from my query to just say, pass in the list name and the item name so that it's more reusable. Not specific just for this list. I can do this for anything. And then the headers were the 3 headers we needed: the accept header, the content type, and the X request digest with that jQuery value. But you see what I mean? How it's all key value, key value, key value. Even in here, everything is key value pairs. That's how JSON's expecting. My success response is just going to be to log to my Chrome console saying it's created. If it fails, it's going to throw an error. Let's give it a shot and see if this is doing what I want it to do. Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, so here's the site. Creating a list item. Here's the console. I'm going to refresh this really quick. If it goes stale, then that date and timestamp gets old and it won't do anything. The list name was demo, right? And item name is demo item. Okay, hit save. List item created. Okay, let's go find out. Go back to the demo list. Refresh. My item. Simple. Okay. That was creating a list item. So I do a lot of talking first, and then I show you the demo because the demo is lightning fast. Rest is quick. So, any questions on that part? Sorry, I know I talk a lot. I apologize, but it's a lot of content to go over. Now we got that item. Let's update the item. Okay. I have to start with a post URL because we're manipulating items in a list. This time, we have to add the item ID. Very important. It doesn't know what item you want unless you add the ID. That's the only way it can uniquely tell you want this specific item to modify. So this time I'm saying give me item number 9, number 6, whatever that item ID is in the list. This is not the ordinal list now like we did before. This is an actual ID from that item. We're going to add 5 headers this time. This time we need an HTTP method merge because we're changing something. So we need to pass the REST engine. What do you want to do with this? Do you want to merge? Do you want to delete? We'll go into delete here in a minute. In this case, we want to merge. If match is asterisk, is an asterisk. We're going to discuss this in a minute. That's a conditional. We're going to go over that very quickly in just a minute. We need to add the accept application JSON because I'm passing it JSON, content type, or because I want JSON back, content type because I'm passing it in, and that X request digest passing the security token. Okay. The request body is going to look just like this. So I'm saying merge the data. If you find the ID, this is what it should be. This data type, but now change the title to something totally different. Let's try that. Oh, first let's discuss the headers. The additional headers. The XHTTP method merge, that's what's required when updating a list item. We're going to change it to delete when we want to delete a list item. The if match is used in conditional circumstances. What you're basically saying is if you find a match, proceed, otherwise don't. Okay? You can read more about this here. I don't have time to go over conditional operations today, but I wanted to provide the URL so you can go through the RFC and look for yourself and see exactly what this means and what other functions are available. There's a whole lot of them. Well, let's do this for real. So we're going to update that list item here using this function. Okay, so now I have the same URL, but I'm passing in that ID. Well, I'm going to get it from a parameter on the screen, but I'm passing in the ID, the URL. And then starting on line 21, I've got a post method. Here's my 5 headers that I said we needed to add. This time I'm saying change it to whatever I put in the item name up here in create list item. And then same thing, item updated, item not updated. Let's give it a shot. So back here to my demo. Now we're going to update a list item. Oh, you know what I need to do first is find out what the item number is of that. So the item ID is 13. Okay. Back to my demo. I want to update in the demo list item number 13, and I want to change it to, holy cow. Save. Probably have to refresh the screen. Nope, item updated. So let's go back here and make sure it updated. And I sure did. Right? Yeah, that's simple. All right, so deleting the list item. So we got the stuff in there, but you want to manage the list. You want to delete it after, somebody clicks something. You want to add this item and delete another one. I mean, it's totally up to you. How do we do that? Well, you begin with a post URL. Same way we did before, passing in the ID of the item. Right? We only need 3 headers this time. This time we need an XHTTP method delete, the if match, because we find it, can proceed, and the security component. Okay? You don't need a request body here because we're deleting something. All SharePoint's concerned with is what ID is it? If I find a match, what do you want me to do with it? Delete it. Okay? Let's give that a shot. I go to code. I'll show you what that looks like real quick. It smells just like the other ones, only a little smaller. This one I'm saying pass in the ID. It's a post operation. All I need is delete it found. Here's my security and what to do when. So when I come back here to my site, this was ID 13. So now I'm going to delete a list item out of the demo list. Delete item 13. Okay, it says item deleted. I refresh the screen, and it's done. It's that easy. All through JavaScript, jQuery, REST. Nope, well, I wouldn't say no code, but no SharePoint specific code. This is all browser code. That's all I have for lists and list items. I mean, you can get the idea from there, how robust this is. Now let's mess with folders and files. So if you want to look at folder information, like the shared documents folder or the pictures library, actual folder list, you would do get folder by server relative URL. It's a mouthful, but it works. And then pass in single quotes or apostrophes / library name, or wherever it is in the hierarchy of your site. You're going to get data back about the selected library. Then you create a folder, and I had an example of this that wasn't working, so I'm going to walk through this and then move on, because I'll take it up enough time. To create a folder, we're going to go to API/web/folders. That's the root collection for all of the folders in your site collection for that site. Add in 3 headers, the security, except in content type for your JSON. And the request body is going to look like this. Now in your metadata, the type is always going to be sp.folder. Your key is going to be in your apostrophes, your server relative URL. And then your value is shared documents, in this case, what I wanted, / folder name. And just like the other things, your folder will be created inside that dot library. Okay. In this case, you locate the server relative URL here. So when you did that API /web /folders, and you got all that data back, in here, inside your folder name, like shared documents, there is an object for server relative URL. You can literally just copy that, paste it into your Ajax query, and be done with it. That's where you get the information from. When you do you have to do API web folders to get that. I said, apologize, I had a demo, wasn't working, but I will show you the demo of how to create a file and insert it into a folder. So we're going to start off, well, for example, if you want to see all the files in a folder, this would be the query you would do. Get folder by server relative URL /files. Just like /items, will show you all of the files in that folder. If you want to see a specific file, you can do OData. If you want to see data about the file, you can do it this way. You can folder name /file name $value, if it's available. To create a file in a folder, it's a post because we're actually inserting something into something. And it's going to look like this. You get folder by server relative URL /file /add, and then in parentheses, URL equals your file name. And with extension. Overwrite equals true is optional. I like it because then I know for sure that if there wasn't anything in there that's being inserted, if it is, I want to overwrite it anyway, like a log file or something. Your request body here is whatever you want to put in the file. So if you want to say like a text file that says something, this is where you would put it in the request body. All you need is one header, the request digest with your security component. Okay, let's try that. Let me show you real quick. I'll show you the code for what that looks like. Create file and folder. So I have my get folder by server relative URL, files /add, overwrite true, and I'm going to make it a text file. It's a post method. The text is coming from the function, from a text box on the screen, and then I'm just passing in my security header. Okay, let's give it a shot. So on here. See, this is the place I'm going to put it, my shared documents folder. Nothing in here right now. So I go to create a file in a folder, folder name, shared documents. File name, we're going to call it demo file. And file context, here is some data. Hit save, okay, file is added. Let's go make sure. Oh, shoot. Okay, there's my file, and just to show I'm not hitting around, I'm going to open it up. Hopefully it will open. So it's open. Where is that? SharePoint. Well, this is all in Azure on top of it, so I'm at the mercy of Azure and ASU's Wi-Fi. Let me go here and it did copy the data into the text file. It basically created a text file with that sentence in it, saved it, and pushed it up to the site. Oh, come on, Azure. Yeah, I know. Let me start a new. I go into documents, and I open up the file. I want to show them that there's text in the file.
Are you open the Explorer view?
Yes. Well, now I can.
Okay.
It's all upset. But, oh, I know why I did it. I'm sorry. It's prompting me on the screen. Let me go back, do it again. It was my fault. Okay, documents, open. There it is. You can type anything in, log file, notes, whatever. It'll save it right to the list. Okay. So let me go back. Well, actually, I'm going back right now. Any questions at this point so far? I got one more component I want to go over, and then we have time for all questions. And that's leveraging permissions. So we've seen how we can create and update list items, manipulate folders, add files to folders, traverse the data model, look at objects, see information about objects. Now we're going to see how we can get information about people and permissions. I'm going to give you code. I'm not going to do an example of any of these. I have examples available on the next couple of slides, but I'm just going to show you what you can do. We can get desired groups. We can target role definitions. We can break inheritance on objects. We can alter group roles on people. We can check permissions, and that is one component I am going to show you and have available. It's a module I wrote that allows you to pass in a group name, and it will tell you if the current logged in user is a member of that group or not. And you can use this for like breaking out of SharePoint to navigate somewhere else if someone's allowed to, or checking to see if they're in some group to add them to the list. There's a lot you can do with that. This would be an example of seeing the ID of that specific group. You would do web/site group / get by name, group name / ID. You're going to need that ID for a lot of operations inside to move around and see, is this person in this group? Is this person a member of this? To break role inheritance from this group, etc. You're going to need that group ID. So that's one of the base operations you're going to need for managing permissions. If you do, so /web/role definition / get by name will give you the ID of the desired role that you want them to perform, the manage hierarchy, the contribute, read only, etc. If I wanted to say, take this list, like my demo list, get by title, / break role inheritance true, it's no different than if you went up to the ribbon icon and said, custom permissions, do you want to break away from role inheritance? Yes, I do. And then true would be passing the current objects and keep them there. False would mean destroy it. Start from scratch. It will do exactly that. But no, this could be very dangerous if you manage it. That's why it requires a post-operation and your security settings. The other ones are just get. If you just want to see information about a list, that's fine. SharePoint isn't there. You can also get information about people. So once you have role assignments, you can get the group ID information, pass that into, where you said get by principal ID, the group ID that you got above here, and it will remove that permission from that group. So you can actually manage group permissions using REST. And then one other one I have here is to set a permission on a specific group. It requires a little more information. Now you have your list, role assignments, add role assignment. Now you need principal ID equals the group ID, and the role definition ID equals the role ID. You can get those from those get queries above. Once you have that information, you can do a lot of permission manipulation on objects in SharePoint from that point, assuming you have the right permissions yourself. One last demo I have is checking permissions. And here, I'll show you the function I wrote for that. It's a little lengthy. But what it is two nested AJAX calls. The first one, and this is another handy snippet. If you want to see in SharePoint, if you want to see, or SharePoint 2013, if you want to see or get the current user's information, login name, user ID, etc., you do underscore lowercase sp, capital, page context info. That object is always available if you in SharePoint 2013 if you use jQuery to leverage it. It has all the information you can imagine about that current security context of the person who's logged in. Login name, user ID. I mean, anything you can traverse about that person is available in that object. So in this case, I'm passing in the user ID because I know if there's for some reason or other, Eric Kozakowski in the organization, the user ID is going to be unique. So I'm accepting the user ID. That's a digit or an integer. I'm passing that into this query saying, and again, web absolute URL using that object, and it's going to get the root URL from the query, from the address bar. API web, get by user ID, pass in my ID. I want to send it JSON data. Okay. I want to accept JSON data back because I like JSON. And then when it's successful, store the data. I'm not using the request object, but just store the data and start traversing it. The login name will be the resulting login name from the SharePoint context, from the ID I gave it. Now pass that in, this is just a counter, pass that in to site groups, get by name. Let me move that over really quick. Ooh, come on. In that group, traverse all the users, give me just the login names of these users. Now, loop through that result set and compare each resulting login name to the item login name I gave you originally. If they match, increment. Starting with 0, if it's greater than 0, I found you, you can get in. If I didn't find you, access denied. And then error tracking below. Let's give it a shot. So in the same page, let me go back to the home page, because that's where I'm calling this JavaScript library. Excuse me. If I open up my console and I type in check permissions, and let me look in here really quick because I have two groups I set up for this demo, just as an example. I'll show you what they are. Okay, I have auditors and I have secured users. I am in the secured users group. I am not in the auditors group. Okay? So, let's check permissions of the guy logged in secured users. Now found. Okay, so I'm in there. Now let's do the same thing with auditors. Access denied. All the rest. I queried site groups, site permissions. Am I allowed in? Well, it depends. Am I in the right group? What you can do with this? Yes, sir.
What's that first gray text underneath your?
Undefined. Because I'm pulling back. I'm console logging like responses back from the in the AJAX, and you can strip that out if you want.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Let me go back to okay, so to summarize, we went over an overview of SharePoint REST and REST in general. We navigated the whole SharePoint REST data structure. We worked through lists and list items. We did operations on lists. We created a file inside of a folder dynamically, and we leveraged permissions using REST. There's a whole lot you can do with SharePoint 2013 REST. Is my whole speech. Are there any questions at all on what we talked about? Yes, ma'am.
How would you authenticate a user to the SharePoint services external from SharePoint? So if you're building like a native app.
You would need, my first thought is that person needs to be, let's say you're using Active Directory as your primary authentication method. You would need that person to be either in the right Active Directory group, and that group to be in the right SharePoint group in your SharePoint site collection, or that person's physical name. I wouldn't recommend physical names. It's harder to maintain if they pass in and out of the organization. But you can put their actual AD name into the SharePoint group to give them access. Authentication should take place in best practice at an Active Directory level and have Active Directory groups nested inside of SharePoint groups and have SharePoint manage it in that way, using what is it? The user profile sync service in SharePoint to synchronize that Active Directory connection at all times. That would be the best method of authentication. You don't have to do that. You can use forms authentication, you can use curves, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But that would be my best practice recommendation. Would be to start off with Active Directory, get them in there, synchronize it with SharePoint, put that group into a SharePoint group, and then allow SharePoint to manage the group in there. This example was more of a, are they in this group? You can check permissions in group, or not permissions, you can check to see if a person's in a group, you can check to see if permission is assigned to a group, you can break that inheritance, you can assign permissions. It's more of a permission manipulation example in this case. Any other questions at all? Okay, well, first, we all, of course, have to thank the sponsors because, like we were discussing earlier, this is a very expensive event, and if not for them, we wouldn't have this event, so that's really awesome. And I worked with a lot of these guys, either as consultants with prior organizations I've been with, or as just good friends in the field, and they're really cool. So if you haven't had a chance to go see their stations, go visit with them. They're really nice. This is the list of references. So this will be available on my website here. So if you either jot that down or take a picture of it, that's the short URL for my website, because I don't think you want to spell my last name. If you do, feel free. I mean, that's the website, kozakowski.net. But the short URL is easier. Go to my website. I'm going to have a blog post up here in the next 24 hours with the embedded video, and also a link to, I have a YouTube channel where I keep all these videos too. There'll be a link there, and the slide deck will be up there. The code samples will be up there, so you can just take this code and take JavaScript, put it in your sites, and test it yourself. Play with it. And then finally, and if you're social, I have social networking accounts. I use them strictly for business purposes, but if you want to follow me on Twitter, that'd be awesome. And then finally, afterwards tonight, they traditionally do SharePoint. I love it. Yeah. But it's going to be at the Thirsty Lion, which is in Tempe Marketplace. It's off of, what is that? McClintock, thank you. I keep missing McClintock for a while. So it's off of McClintock, right by the 202. You can't miss it. It's right off of Tempe Town Lake. It's huge. But Thirsty Lion is right off of the entrance that you're coming in off of. So meet us there. If they ask you if you have reservations, it's under SharePoint Saturday, and they'll know where to find you. All right. Otherwise, thank you very much. Appreciate it.